Good afternoon, everybody. This is Robert Phoenix with you today on the Friday FArcast, coming at you live from Fredericksburg, Texas, as Jasper valiantly tries to make it up here and be a part of the proceedings. Got a great show in store for you today. And as you can see, front and center is the leadoff batter for today's show, E.Michael Jones, Professor E.Michael Jones, the curator of Culture Wars, a website and a magazine, a very prolific and established author, a renegade professor, and somebody who I think is really one of the great minds of the 21st century as it relates to speaking truth to power and doing it unflinchingly and with courage. So, Michael, thanks for being on the show, and congratulations on the new book. You want to hold that up?
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, here it is. Just arrived today from the printer. Logos Rising. Available now. Go to culturewars.com and buy a copy.
One of the things that I'm curious about is your process as a writer, because you're really prolific. Can you kind of give some insight into how that works for you? Do you get up at a certain time every day? How do you get through the actual discipline, organization of creating, a book and a copious body of work?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be expelled from academe 2 years after I got hired as an assistant professor at a Catholic college because I was against abortion. And this was God's plan for my life. It seemed like a catastrophe at the time. I had just moved my family out here to South Bend, Indiana. We had just bought a house, but it turns out it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So after I left academe and was relieved of all of those burdens, I started a magazine. It was a monthly magazine. And the result was that I had to meet deadlines every month. And as a result, I've been doing that for almost 40 years now. And so after 40 years of meeting deadlines, the writing just kind of comes naturally. And so in the beginning, it was short pieces. I had written my dissertation at that point, and one article in a professional journal. But that was about it. But now I had to come up with something every month, and it started off being short articles. And as I proceeded along that path, I started to understand things better. And as I understood things better, I began to see the bigger picture. And as the bigger picture emerged, I started writing longer books. And so the culmination of this in terms of pages was Barren Metal, which turned out to be 1,400 pages long. So Jewish Revolutionary Spirit is 1,200, and this book is only 780 pages. So it's a light read for all of you out there.
So instead of a marathon, this is like a 1,500 meters run, right?
Yeah, this is the 1,500 meter. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So a lot of people have questions about what is logos, and they've actually asked this question as I've brought it up here on the show on a number of occasions. Would you be willing to share your definition of logos for the people that have asked that question?
Yeah, it's a Greek word that means word. And the most familiar translation of it is the beginning of St. John's Gospel, which is translated, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't understand what that means at all. And ever since I've been reading the Bible, I've never understood it. But I started to understand it when I started to study Greek. And I opened the lexicon, and there are like column after column of English equivalents to the word logos. And I realized then this is one of the most important words in human history. As a matter of fact, it is in effect the center of human history, because it also means reason. And we are by definition rational creatures. And so this word goes to the heart of what we are, and how that concept, how our understanding of what we are developed over time from the beginning. So this book begins at the beginning. It begins at the beginning of everything, creation, and it goes all the way up to the present, and tries to talk about how, in spite of all the setbacks in human history, it continues to rise. Logos continues to rise, because our consciousness is rising along with it. That's what it means, and there are setbacks throughout history, of course, because of the wickedness of men. But there's never been a time when God wasn't in charge of history, and God, being God, knew about all those setbacks from the beginning, and he knew that
Right.
it was going to rise in spite of them.
Right.
Because the whole crux, I mean, the first part of this book is called The History of Logos, where I describe how that word came into and how it develops. But the second part is the Logos of history, which means there's never been a time when God hasn't been in charge of human history. And now we can understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now we're in a situation where everybody is scared, everybody's confused, but nothing has changed in that regard. God is still in charge of human history. And the book has arrived, I think, at a crucial moment, because
Absolutely.
right now we have a conflict between science and religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, you got the scientists telling the President Trump, "You got to do this. You got to shut everything down." And
Right.
you have religion in terms of the Catholic Church, the church I belong to, basically going along with everything the scientists say. This
Mm-hmm.
is not a good situation. And this book, if it talks about anything, it talks about that conflict between science and religion from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
From the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, when man first realized that there was a God and started talking about it and came up with mythology, like God is a father. Everybody knew that.
Mm-hmm.
And God is a father. And so you go into mythology, and then suddenly they realize this is a dead end. It ended up in Greek mythology, and then Socrates came along and said, no, it's got to be something different than that. God can't transform himself into a bull so he can rape human women.
Right. Right.
Anyway, so we have a moment now where we have to understand what's going on, because we are getting all sorts of competing, conflicting information. I think there's a hidden agenda behind this whole thing, and I think this book will help us to understand what's going on.
Logos is the word. I've been watching a very interesting sort of act of prestidigitation, the invasion of the body snatchers. We watched essentially or witnessed the vanishing of the Pope. Like the Pope has not been very public. I mean, there were scenes of him coughing and perhaps having the so-called coronavirus. And then as the Pope descends, Anthony Fauci ascends, and for all intents and purposes, he becomes this new Pope in some ways, right? The Pope of science. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's one or the other. When the church is in the ascendant, then science gets integrated into categories, religious categories. When science is on the ascendant, then the church gets integrated into scientific categories. So we came down to a conflict here, and the conflict is over religious services. Who has the right to determine when religious services are going to be held and when they are not going to be held? Well, the church just pretty much rolled over and acceded to whatever the government said. And now we're in a question, well, how long now? And this is a crisis in America, because we believe it's pretty much de facto the separation of church and state. And the state will allow the church to do its own business, but according to certain rules. And what we saw under the Obama administration was an attempt to expand the power of the state to get groups like the Little Sisters of the Poor to pay for contraception. Well, Donald Trump came in and that put an end to that. But we still have this conflict here that goes back to the crucial issue is who determines what is real?
Right. Right.
And who determines what is a necessary service?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a situation now where the oligarchs have imposed this brave new world on us, where abortion is considered a necessary service, but going to church isn't. So you can stay in you can't go to church services anymore, but you can watch pornography.
Right.
Well, who created this world for us, and what does that have to do with a virus? So I think we have to be able to distinguish here, not just between the religion and science, okay, and who's got the upper hand, but also categories of the mind and categories of reality. So I've said this before. I mean, so we have women. That's a category of reality. Everybody knows there are women and so on and so forth. There are some people who say that's a category of the mind. It's a social construct, okay? Right. Well, we disagree with that. You know, God created us male and female. But then if you accept that category of reality, then the people are saying, well, you must accept women's rights. Well, if you accept women's rights, then you have to accept abortion. And suddenly we have this sleight of hand and they pull the fast one on us. And I
Right.
think something similar is happening right now with the coronavirus.
Right. In essence, really what we're looking at is almost like an occulted magical act, right? I mean, there's something going on an occult level, and there's this kind of disappearance and prestidigitation where one version of so-called reality is now being replaced by another so-called version of reality. And the truth is, none of those realities were ever all that real to begin with. Right. I mean, we had kind of a semblance of things, but even in, prior to 3/11, even that reality was suspect, right?
We have how do we get our ideas of reality?
Yeah.
We get them from a screen pretty much.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we are all plugged into these electronic media, and now they tell us what is real and what is not real, even though it's kind of an illusion. Well, what we saw over the course of 2019 was suddenly a massive uprising against the conventional narrative based on the internet, what we're doing right now. So
Yeah.
we used to depend on ABC, NBC, and CBS to tell us what is real. And Walter Cronkite would come on and say John F. Kennedy was murdered by a lone deranged gunman because Alan Dulles, who was the head of the CIA, told him to say that. Well, those days are gone. Okay, Walter Cronkite's dead, and no one has replaced him. And now we have alternative forms of information, and this caused a crisis for the internet. I'm sorry, it caused a crisis for the mainstream media.
That's right.
So what you had, interestingly, ABC did a story, and the story headline begins, sorry, conspiracy theorists, coronavirus is not a weapon. Now, what they're saying here is that they are now lagging behind the internet. They have to deal with the internet because that's where they got that story. They have to deal with the internet narrative when
Right.
they had total control over the complete narrative before. This all happened over the course of 2019.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now the internet and alternative media are controlling the narrative, and conventional and mainstream media are, you're right, absolutely lagging behind. Here's a good case in point. The last time we talked, I think, was almost 2 years ago, and I had you in the show, and I thought it was a really, really great show. And then after that, you started to connect with Owen Benjamin and Rush V and a lot of other kind of alternative media hosts, and a lot of them kind of younger men, right, who were really kind of opening up to this idea of logos and moving from kind of a Dionysian to a more Apollonian, a more stoical world. And you made a real impact during that time and continue to do that. What was going on with you during that time? Were you kind of realizing all of a sudden your message was starting to go kind of omnidimensional in a number of different areas and directions?
Yeah, you're right. It did begin with Owen Benjamin, who introduced me to a whole new group of people. But I had already written a book that basically, 20 years before I talked to Owen Benjamin, I wrote a book called Libido Dominandi, which said that sexual liberation was a form of political control. As soon as I said that, it resonated immediately with that audience because they were primarily 20-year-olds who had become addicted to pornography
Interesting.
as a way of distracting them from their student loan debts. And so they were leading miserable lives of addiction and bondage to sin and so on and so forth. And suddenly you say this thing and suddenly it resonated with those people because it's true.
That's right. It's true.
No other reason.
Yeah.
I can't
right.
force anybody to do anything. And suddenly they started acting on it. And so there was a boycott this past November, a boycott of pornography and masturbation that really got the oligarchs upset. And we know that because there was an article in Rolling Stone attacking these people for not watching pornography. And they called them anti-Semites because they weren't watching pornography. This is so the moment suddenly the two things came into alignment. In other words, the idea, which had been launched 20 years ago, finally made contact with the audience.
That's right. That's right.
And so it's the category of reality coming in contact with the category of the mind, and that's what Aquinas would call the truth, and that's why it worked.
I wonder if you could speak about the divine potential of catastrophe, because obviously you had a downturn in your career where it looked like you're out of academia, something you'd worked for and towards all your life. But what happens as a result of that is a whole new path, and you discovering yourself in perhaps a more intimate and very powerful way. And here we are in the process of some form of social and economic catastrophe. So you've experienced the micro. Could you talk a little bit about that? How we think things are terrible and things happen to us when in reality they can actually be showing us a different way and a different path?
Yeah, the best example is from Scripture, the story of Joseph. Joseph was his brothers were so jealous they were going to kill him. And one brother said, no, just throw him in a cistern. He got sold into slavery in Egypt. Well, that's a catastrophe. That's a terrible thing to happen to you. But that wasn't the end of the story.
Right.
And then he rises in Egypt to a very high position. He's in charge of the granary, and suddenly the famine breaks out in Israel, and the brothers have to come to him. And he strings them all a little bit, and then he finally shows who he is. And then he says to them, the evil that you intended to do to me has been turned by God's power into good. Well, that's a profound statement. As a matter of fact, that's basically the summation of all of human history. So God created human beings with free will, which means he had to allow them to do evil. Well, if that were the end of the story, we'd all be dead. We wouldn't be here. Right. Because the other part of the story is that God has the power, knew that in advance, but knew that there were goods that could come from free will that couldn't have come about otherwise. And so he took control of history and took the evil in it and turned it into good. So we need the eyes to see it. It's happening all the time. It has happened throughout human history. The fact that we're here is a sign that it has happened and continues to happen, but we need the eyes to see. And that's why, in a sense, I wrote this book, because it's about that motion in history. So if we just take a little glimpse into what's happening, the oligarchs created globalism because it was in their benefit to extract cheap labor from all over the world and skim off the profits. But the globalism then led to this catastrophe, and now we're seeing the opposite taking place now. We're seeing the end of globalism. Suddenly we're realizing that borders are important. Like the difference between Italy and Germany right now. Italy has a very high rate of coronavirus and Germany has a low rate. Well, what's the difference? According to the globalists, there's no difference between all of those people. Well, it turns out that there is a difference. And this is what we're starting to awake to. So I think any catastrophe is a moment of opportunity.
Right.
It's because it's a change.
Right.
And there's some moments in history where the oligarchs are so wicked and where they have their hands they're clutching the steering wheel of our culture so tightly that only a catastrophe can break the grip that they have before they drive it over the cliff. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're seeing now. So I think we should all be hopeful about what's going on now.
That's a great message. So if people were to get a copy of Logos, which I actually encourage people to do, what would they find in Logos that they could, and I'm sure everybody have their own personal experience, but what would they find in your book that would be mana for them during a time like this?
The fact that there is an ultimate reality and that the human mind can grasp it. Every human mind, to some extent, can grasp that human reality. Now, what does this mean? Well, this breaks the hold of the scientists, because the scientists now have a monopoly on ultimate reality. And once that happens, that's the end of democracy, first of all, because we can't make any informed choices. We have to do what the scientists said, and we have scientists like Anthony Fauci. What is he doing around? Why is he still around? He should have been fired after the AIDS debacle.
Right, absolutely.
The fact that he fast-tracked AZT and killed thousands of homosexuals with that poison should disqualify him from making any public statement ever again. But now he's back in the saddle and he wants to extend this quarantine forever and ever. This is his moment. Well, wait a minute. We don't need you guys anymore. You have led us into one disaster after another. I am basically liberating the entire world from bondage to scientists right now, because I'm saying the real issue is not science. The real issue is logos.
Right.
Philosophy, not microbiology, not Darwinism, not
Darwinism.
ideologies.
Yep. Yep.
It's logos, and the human mind is capable of apprehending logos, and logos is God.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about Darwinism. And this is the extension, the ultimate extension of Darwinism. This is Darwinism elevated to the high priesthood or the high priest class.
Well, wait a minute.
Absolutely.
It may not be natural selection, though. It may
No.
be a bioweapon where Bill Gates wants to eliminate useless eaters.
Yeah, right.
Leben unwertes Leben, as the Nazis used to say. You
Yeah.
know, and we don't know because you never know when it's happening. But I mean, I've discussed all these possibilities in the article. It's at culturewars.com. It's
Right.
called The Coronavirus and the Cunning of Reason. And the cunning of reason was Hegel's term for providence, because he said that, you know, human beings have their wicked intentions, but God takes them and turns them into good. God uses people like Alexander the Great. He was not a great person, but he used him to spread Greek culture. And Greek culture was important because that's where we get the word logos. And the
Right.
Christians used logos as their way of introducing themselves to the rest of the world. So this was all important. And I think if you read this book, you get a sense of the big picture. And once
Right.
you have the big picture, you're not going to be panicked by Fauci coming on and saying the world's coming to an end
Right.
unless you do what I say.
Yeah.
We have to
Absolutely.
put an end to this. This is what this uprising in 2019 was about. We're tired of experts going on ABC and telling us that the world is coming to an end unless you do what we say. This is over. And they know it's over. And that may be the hidden meaning of what's going on right now.
Right. It feels like they're pushing all their chips in now to try to just flip everything over and then create their one world government, the new world, or whatever you want to call it. But you know, I've been using this analogy that when 9/11 happened, it happened very quickly, and a lot of people had to, you know, react to it, recover from it, respond to it, learn from it. And what we've been witnessing is kind of like a frame by frame version of 9/11. It's happening at a time where people can take this in, assimilate it, and then kind of wake up in real time. It's a very interesting event, I think, culturally. Do you still see your buddy Mayor Pete around South Bend? Whatever happened to him?
He's back in town now that he, for some reason, he didn't win. I don't know how that happened, but he didn't win the nomination. I guess
Right.
you know, it's the problem with Indiana. He is the greatest politician in the state of Indiana. The problem is no one will vote for him because we have crappy voters. We need better voters in the state of Indiana. And I think the same thing. He's got the best resume in the world, but the voters didn't like him. So get new voters.
He couldn't even win his own state, right? Is that what you're saying here?
For some reason, the United States is not ready for a guy who's ready to kiss another guy and call him his husband. I don't know what's wrong with the people of America, but you know, I don't know. But yes, he's back in town.
Okay. So, hey, Michael, do you have a time to take a few questions from our
Sure.
chat room?
Yes.
Okay. Let me bring Steve in here. And we've unmuted Steve. And
let's see, here I am.
Hey, Steve, what do you got for Dr. Jones?
Dr. Jones, great to talk to you. I've enjoyed you on other shows for quite a while. Thank you for your time. Yeah, we have some good questions here. A few logos, how logos relates to the trivium, or how the trivium relates to logos. There's one on perennial philosophy, also the divine feminism, you know, the Gnostic Sophia. But also what I'd like to hear you also speak about is usury. We always hear about usury in relation to money, but it seems like we're getting used in many different ways.
Yeah, usury generally means inordinate interest, but it used to mean just any interest. And it used to be any type of exploitation of an economic situation where you take advantage of someone who is weaker than you are. So if you put all those things together, that's sort of what usury means. Usury is unnatural. If you want to talk about logos, nature is created by God with certain parameters, and usury violates them. And the one man who understood this was Dante, who put usurers in the same circle in hell with homosexuals. because the homosexual takes what is fertile, namely sex, and renders it sterile through homosexual activity. And the usurer takes what is sterile, namely money, and gets it to copulate with compound interest. So they're the flip side of each other, but both of them are unnatural. And so what you had is an economy. We have an economy now, which is basically unnatural, where the reason in human history, Barren Metal is the book I wrote about this. And it's a history of capitalism as the conflict between labor and usury. Those are the two alternatives. You can have an economy based on rewarding labor, because labor is the source of all value, which is true. Or you can have an economy where, as Shylock says, your ducats can copulate faster than Laban's ewes and rams. If ducats can copulate, then you don't need labor. And that's the economy we live in. It's based on the good of the speculator, the good of the usurer. And what usury does is concentrate wealth into fewer and fewer hands, which is what's happened over the past 40 years, ever since Paul Volcker was head of the Fed, and all the usury laws got struck down. And it leads to the systematic appropriation of all surplus value, which is what happens when you take flour and turn it into bread. That is all sucked in because everybody is in debt and all of the surplus value goes to the usurer. And then we end up with the world we live in today. Right.
Absolutely. What about the trivium in relationship to logos? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the trivium it goes with the quadrivium. And this is basically a curriculum. It's a curriculum for how do you educate people. And these are the essential things that you need to know. They're like grammar and arithmetic and rhetoric and so on and so forth. That was the classical version of the curriculum. It got transformed into the ratio studiorum that became the basis for Jesuit education. And it was usually, by that time, it was basically doing Latin. Learning Latin, you learn grammar, you learn vocabulary, and so on and so forth from studying Latin. And I was just unfortunate enough to land in the educational system as it was being withdrawn. So I had some Greek, I had some Latin, but I wasted my time on things like chemistry and things like that. I won the biology medal because I love biology, but the other stuff was just a waste of time. I should have spent more time doing Latin and Greek.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Jones, it's been great to have you on. Thanks for joining us. I know you're super busy. I'm happy to be a show where you're kind of breaking logos live. I think it's really, really great, really cool. And you can find Dr. Jones's material at Culture Wars, and go grab a copy of Logos Rising. I have a feeling I'm going to get one, and I have a feeling it'll change our lives. Thanks for being on again with us.
Thank you. Thank
you.
All right.
Have a great day. We'll see you down the line somewhere.
Thank you.
Okay, there we go. Great. Dr. Jones, Dr. E.Michael Jones, a legend. What'd you think, Steve?
Yep. He's definitely has a good mind, and he's been doing what he's doing for a long time. We're lucky to have his input.
Yeah, and he's very controversial. He'll say things that people will not agree with. And, I allow people to say pretty much whatever they want. And that's, kind of always been my style. And, I may not always agree with Dr. Jones, with some things, like I have clients who are, they're, quote unquote gay, and I don't discriminate against anybody. And I find their lives to be intrinsic and valuable. So, I have a bit of a different take, but I understand where he's coming from. And I certainly understand it from like a cultural level and a level of programming and a level of kind of organized programming and even kind of organized, I don't use the word deception, but it comes along those lines. Anyway, thanks again for Dr. Jones. We got Andrew Kaufman. Dr. Andrew Kaufman is here. You want to say hi to him?
Hey, Andy.
I got to unmute him. Hold on.
Yeah.
There you go. Hey, Dr. Hey, Dr.
Muted.
Kaufman.
He's muted again.
Uh-oh.
There you go. Oh.
Oh, we both hit it at the same time. I'm sorry.
Okay, so you are free to speak. Welcome, Andrew, Dr. Kaufman.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I had a chance to look at that video you sent me, and it was quite difficult to watch. I don't know if you've had a chance to display it on the show yet, or what you'd like to start talking about.
Do you want to jump into that? You want to jump into that video?
Sure.
Well, I'm going to play a little clip of it, and Steve, we're going to bring you back with the Q&A, get some good questions for Dr. K, okay?
Okay.
All righty. All right, so we're going to mute Steve here. So let me give you guys the background on this video. I ran across it last night, and actually early this morning, and it is one of the most troubling videos that I've seen in quite a while. And it's quite timely in a lot of ways. And I'm not going to play the entire video. I'm going to kind of skip ahead. And I sent it to Dr. Kaufman prior to our show today because I wanted to talk about it and get his take on it. So this is kind of the first public case of resistance to being tested with coronavirus. And this guy was live streaming during that time. So Steve, I'm just going to do this right here and take you off a... If I can get you off a video, Steve. So, because you're on the main screen right now. Let me see if I can do this. There we go. I think we have Steve off a video. I don't know why he's there. Anyway, let's do this. Let me play this YouTube video. Go into screen share mode. And just to set the stage, the guy looks like he has prison tats. I mean, this is a guy that is involved in some form of civil and kind of morphs into uncivil disobedience. Oh, I got to do the audio. I always forget to do the audio. Hold on. There we go. And he got to this hospital room because he was not feeling well, and he was brought in by ambulance. And this is what ensues. Pay attention here.
You can't force me to do anything. You can't force me to do anything. I asked for a lawyer, brother. You can't do that. If y'all gonna try to quarantine me or whatever, you can't force me to put anything in my arm. You cannot do that. It doesn't work like that.
You gotta do a workup on you, dude.
It doesn't work like that.
But you're sick, man.
But it doesn't work like that. How do you know I'm sick? You haven't even done a test on me.
You're coughing already.
You won't let me do a test. How do you know I'm sick? You haven't even done a test on me.
They tried to do a test on you. In order to do a test, they got
to work like that. It doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. It doesn't work like that.
Right. They got you, dude.
You can't force me to do anything, bro.
But you're sick, man.
I'm a man.
We understand that you're a man.
I'm a man. You can't force me to do anything, bro.
But you gotta do a workup on you.
Before you stick a needle in me, I want a lawyer up here. You can't do that. Am I under arrest? Am I under arrest?
No, you're not under arrest.
Well, how can you force me to do something?
So, James, try not to.
How can you force me to do something if I'm not under arrest?
Listen, I'm trying to explain to you. The doctor.
Shit don't change.
Doctors talk to you.
Some shit don't change today, bro. Y'all talked to me when I was a kid.
I'm trying to explain.
I was a kid too. And I'm a man now.
Listen to him, right?
I'm a man now. Okay, I'm listening.
So the doctors talk to you. They did not feel like you have the capacity to make medical decisions based off their discussion with you. And so
how do I not have that?
That's the
I'm a grown man now. How do I not have the capacity?
Okay? And all we're trying to do is help you. Nobody wants to hurt you. We're just trying to make sure that you're okay.
I am okay.
Okay, so let me just stop here for a second. They've basically cordoned him off here. They've got a human wall, and he's resisting for as long as he can. He begins to talk about this is a revolution. Like, these are the words that he uses. And then he said, one of the orderlies said, or nurses said, the doctor feels like you are not mentally competent to make a medical decision. That's a really big phrase. So I'm going to fast forward because we only have half an hour with Dr. Kaufman. I want to get his take on this.
Yeah, so Robert, actually, I, being a psychiatrist and a forensic psychiatrist, have actually evaluated many patients for that. It's called decision-making capacity. And competency is related to that. That's a legal term, so a judge would determine competency, but this is a common thing that happens in the hospital, but they are clearly misusing it here as a tactic. And so I can speak about that if you like.
Let's do that. I want to play a little bit more and then get to the unfortunate ending, which is actually kind of horrific in some ways. So here we go. Let's see where he is now in his negotiation.
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. Things need to change in this country.
There's no other option.
Things need to change in this country. So, these fake ass Dallas rappers, all you hoe ass niggas, that shit gotta change, bro. You niggas out here are selfish as hell, man. Y'all ain't giving out no food or nothing, bro. You niggas out here giving bikes. Y'all giving bikes.
My man.
Nah, bro, don't touch me, bro. We will tear this bitch up, bro. I will tear this bitch up, bro. Shit, get away from me. Please, can I have my personal space?
Okay.
I want my space, bro. Step back and get on. I'm gonna show y'all. I will show y'all, bro. I know what's right, bro.
Okay, James, please.
I will show y'all, bro.
So he says fake ass Dallas rappers. He's got to be from Dallas. Then this has got to be Dallas. Now they begin to touch him and violate his space, and this is where things really start to go south here. Here, let me just go. Right here. Here we go. Right here.
Man, I'm begging you, bro. I'm begging you, bro. Please leave me alone.
Be on the bed then.
Please leave me alone. Please leave me alone.
They can give you a shot right here on the chair.
Please leave me alone. Please leave me alone, bro.
Not until you get on the bed.
I'm not getting on my bed.
Help us, man. Help me out, bro.
It doesn't work like that, bro. Anybody know a lawyer, bro? Somebody send me a lawyer? Bro, no!
Come on, James.
It don't work like that, man. This shit ain't right, man. Don't put the phone down now, motherfucker. Nah, bro, leave me alone. I don't want no needle in my arm. It don't work like that.
James, come on.
No, it does not work like that, bro.
Please.
No. Y'all need to change mental health awareness, mental health help,
You want
all
this
that,
right
man.
here?
Man, no.
No,
man.
Come on, man. Help me out, bro.
No.
Man,
The time is now. The time is now. No. I'm not on drugs, none of that, bro. I'm sane. I'm a sane man. Y'all the ones that's crazy.
Let's go ahead just a little bit.
Stand it down, bro. Please leave me the fuck alone, bro. It don't work like that, bro. Y'all weak in the bitch.
Right here. James, come on. Come on, bro.
Stop. Relax. Stop. I'm not choking you.
You choking me, bro.
Stop.
You're choking me, bro.
Stop.
Help!
Stop.
Help, man. This shit ain't right, bro.
Stop.
This ain't right. All right. It's going to be a revolution now. Yeah.
All right, let's stop it there. The cries of human anguish. That's the human soul crying out right there. Let's unpack that, Dr. Kaufman. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think, first of all, I need to collect myself a little bit because I find my heart palpitating and I'm feeling intense emotions just watching that because I think about my family and my children and what is going to be forced upon us in the coming weeks as a result of this situation. So I apologize that I'm a little bit emotional about it. But clearly they are violating this man's rights to make his own decisions about his own body, which is something that is a right that is given to us perhaps by God or by nature. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly been codified in many different treaties and agreements and the Constitution, the Nuremberg Code, etc. And it's being completely disregarded here. I see that they tried to manipulate him, saying that the doctors were worried about his ability to make decisions. But I'll tell you that that's something that you need to have a very thorough assessment, and there are specific criteria. And I know that aside from psychiatrists, doctors don't really understand how to do that. So that's one of the most common consults you get as a psychiatrist in the hospital. And you have to basically demonstrate that you understand the risks and benefits of the proposed procedure, which in this case is a test, and that you have a rational reason for refusing. And in my opinion, he expressed that he didn't feel sick with those kinds of symptoms, and that he did not want to be forced to be quarantined or have any of his other rights taken away. I see that as very rational, but this is a technique that sometimes is used by doctors as a way around the rules of allowing someone to consent. And this is one of the most egregious examples I've seen of that. And then they used physical force to violate him. And you could see how he responded to that. I mean, when I was watching the video, I was expecting him to start throwing punches and try to fight his way out of the situation. And he did not do that. He, seemed to behave at a very high level, and was struck emotionally by that, with the tears and the wailing at the end. And it's just a horrible situation.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. And like I said, I mean, that was anguish beyond his life in a lot of ways. And I feel like in many ways that's our anguish, and being held in check and prescribed and ordered around by people who are following orders, right, for the betterment of the greater good. My feeling is the way to get out of that situation is to not be in the hospital in the first place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I agree 100%. And in fact, I'd like to tell you something about my own situation, that I have a job as a conventional medicine doctor at a facility. I won't tell you any details about it, but what they decided to do about a week and a half ago is actually have a checkpoint for all people entering and the facility. And they want to monitor your temperature using a forehead thermometer. And as soon as I saw this, I became immediately concerned, because I thought about what are the consequences of that. And first of all, those thermometers are not very accurate. And secondly, a fever doesn't really mean anything. It's very, very nonspecific. We know that many, many diseases would have a fever. And it reminded me actually of Nazi Germany, where you had to show your papers and they have all these checkpoints. And so I had basically decided that if I was made to submit to that I was not going to be working there anymore. Fortunately, I contacted the person in charge and explained my position, and they realized that they need me there because I am a doctor, and gave me the courtesy of an exemption. But I don't know how long that's going to last. But I certainly, every time I leave my house and interact with people, I see that, they appear to be afraid of me. Most people are going along and cooperating even beyond what is required of them. And I'm just very, very concerned about this situation.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that's been talked about is, what exactly is a virus? And the Dr. Thomas Cowan video has been making the rounds and talking about all the different levels of electrification, the cell excretion of toxicity. And then we have this other narrative about these labs where things are being done and things are being created. And we have, Lieber from Harvard, and we have the guys up in Manitoba, Canada, and then we have the Level 4 lab in Wuhan. So what are we talking about here? Because on the one hand, there seems to be an insane amount of money that's being invested in creating viruses and vaccines. And then on the other hand, there's a theory that viruses don't even really exist. And they're born out of our cells' desire to detox. Where are we with those two realities?
Yeah, well, I would actually say that the theory is that viruses cause disease. And there's when germ theory was first being developed, there was a scientist named Robert Koch, a German scientist. In fact, they have a very prestigious research facility named after him in Germany. And he developed a set of 4 rules. And these are the criteria that you have to meet in order to prove that a certain microbe or germ actually causes an illness. And the first one of those is pretty simple. all you have to do is be able to isolate and purify the germ out of people who are sick, and you would be completely unable to isolate that same germ out of people who are healthy. And every person that was ill with that disease would have that germ, and every person who didn't have that disease wouldn't have that germ. And this is just the first of 4 criteria that need to be satisfied in order to show that some germ causes a disease. Well, looking back through all of the research that's available and published for any virus that causes an illness, that first postulate has not been satisfied through experimental evidence for even one virus. And the same is true of this alleged virus. So I actually was inspired by Dr. Cowan because he mentioned something that I had forgot about, but I knew about back when I was doing more molecular biology research, something called exosomes. And after I really examined this and read through tons of papers and looked at tons of images from electron microscopes, what I learned was that what they are alleging is this virus is virtually identical to exosomes. And then I found that actually prominent researchers in virology and HIV, such as Dr. James Hildreth from Johns Hopkins University, have actually stated directly that viruses are exosomes, exosomes are viruses in every sense of the word. So what exosomes are is they are little vesicles, little sacs of fluid that contain RNA, just like we're told that COVID does. And your body releases them from its cells in response to some kind of insult. And the research shows that that could be several things. It could be ionizing radiation. It could be toxins and poisons, including heavy metals, pesticides, and bacterial endotoxins. It can be released in response to psychological stress, such as the fear that people are under now, and many other conditions. In fact, much of the literature seems to indicate that any disease state could cause our cells to release exosomes, and they have some important functions that actually help us heal. One of the functions is intracellular communication. So they send a signal to a remote part of your body, alerting them to the danger or conveying other information. And some of that information is contained in the RNA material itself. They've also been shown to actually be able to gobble up toxins. And so there's a really interesting experiment where they had some kind of bacteria that made an endotoxin that was poisonous to the cells. And they mixed that with cells that were not expressing exosomes, and those cells died from the bacterial toxin. And then they mixed it with cells that were expressing exosomes, and they actually have photographs under the microscope that show that the exosomes actually gobbled up the endotoxins. And in that experiment, the cells that were expressing it survived. So it seems to me that the most likely thing that they're actually testing for with this PCR test is exosomes. Now, I actually have a research assistant who is currently trying to scan the probes from the PCR test against the human genome to see if the sequence from the test that they're using is found in our own genetic material.
Interesting.
And if that's conclusive, then we could know for sure that the test is actually testing for our own RNA rather than that of some foreign germ that's invading our body. But all of the studies that purported to isolate this virus from, and by the way, they only looked at a very small number of people. It was like less than 10 people that these experiments were done on. They did not isolate and purify any virus out of a sick person. What they did is they took fluid from a person and mixed it with cancer cells. And we know that cancer cells express exosomes. There's tons of research on that. And it was lung cancer cells. And actually there's specific research on lung cancer cells. In fact, last summer, there was a paper that came out where they were trying to develop a diagnostic test for lung cancer, which was testing the genes of exosomes or the genetic material of exosomes in lung cancer patients. And it seems that they could have actually just repeated that experiment. And then instead of saying that it was related to the cancer exosomes, that it was a virus instead. So what has happened as a result of this is that the test is very inaccurate. And since there's no gold standard because they haven't purified the virus by itself from any body fluids, they can't compare it to that. And of course, they haven't tested people who are healthy to show that the test is negative in those people. So they had to estimate what the accuracy or the error rate of this test is. And one paper that actually subsequently was retracted, and there's no scientific reason given for the retraction, they estimated a false positive rate of 80%. So that would mean that if you, and these are in asymptomatic people. So if people have pneumonia, there might be different numbers.
Right.
But these would be like someone who was exposed to someone else or who had traveled and they went to get tested. So that would mean that 4 out of 5 times there is a positive result that the person actually does not have the illness. And I would go a step further, because even the CDC on March 24th on their website wrote about the test being unreliable. And they mentioned another specific thing that I hadn't even considered, which is that, so in the theory, if you follow the theory that viruses do cause disease, they would say that if the virus is in your body at a very low level, that it's not actively causing the disease. But if there are millions and millions and millions of copies of it, that's when there's enough of it to actually cause damage to our body. And the PCR test does not differentiate between those two conditions at all. It would be positive in both conditions, because the amount of amplification they do of the DNA is so great that even if there's only a teeny tiny amount, like a needle in a haystack, they'll still have a positive test.
Right.
And so basically you could be healthy and test positive for this, or you could be sick and test positive, but it doesn't prove that that's the cause of the illness.
Right.
And this is right from the CDC saying that.
Right. Right. For those of you who aren't aware, PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction. And that's the test they're using. And to your point, we had a case here in San Antonio where we had a number of these cruise ship travelers quarantined at a base here in San Antonio. And the headline story was there was a woman who had tested 3 times. 2 times it was negative. And the third time it was positive, but she tested positive after they had released her from the quarantine. So, this is just an incredibly kind of slippery territory and, almost borderline shoddy science.
I wouldn't say it's borderline. I would say clearly for the people out there.
I was being kind, by the way.
Well,
to your profession.
Maybe it's easier for me to make a bold statement like that because, if you just rely on the headlines and, there are all these like science magazines that report on these studies and they make it sound very conclusive. But in order to really figure out what's going on, you have to actually go to the scientific paper and you have to read the method section. And that's where they describe how they designed the experiment. And of course, they make it extremely confusing to read this section. So I tell you that probably 99 out of 100 doctors, if they read any scientific papers at all, they're skipping over the method section. But the thing is, if you look at the results and you want to trust that the results are accurately telling you what you think they are, you need to read the methods, because the experimental design can tell you if it's testing what you think or not, right? So when they mix it with those lung cancer cells, that tells me who knows what they're testing. Because how do you know if it comes from the lung cancer cells or from the fluid from the sick patient? There's no way to know. Yeah,
absolutely. So you have a psychiatric background and you also have a medical background together, correct?
Yeah. So I originally went to MIT and studied molecular biology and did a lot of research there. I worked for a year in the biotech industry, and I helped develop a molecular modeling department for drug design at a growing biotech company. And I also worked for the New York Department of Health, actually doing surveillance on AIDS cases in a CDC-sponsored position as a public health advisor. So I was actually collecting the same kind of data that they would be collecting now to get the numbers of, how many people this and that. So I know a little bit about how that system works. And then I did go back to medical school eventually, but I also was a physician assistant first, and I worked in oncology medicine. So I have that more general medicine background, working with very ill cancer patients and leukemia patients. And then after medical school, I did specialize in psychiatry and then subspecialize in forensic psychiatry. And I was on the faculty at a medical school in upstate New York for several years, and I conducted research there. I have published research studies and book chapters, and I was in several leadership positions, and I even ran a medical device startup company. So I have kind of a very broad amount of experience, and it's not just in psychiatry and forensic psychiatry.
So one of the things that I've been talking about on this show for a while is something called mindset, and what we need to be able to embrace in order to get through a time of crisis or catastrophe or very deep and powerful change and transformation. And along with mindset is body set. Like, so in your experience as both a psychiatrist and a medical doctor, bridging both those worlds, can you talk a little bit about the type of mindset that we theoretically should be thinking about during a time like this? And also, what are some of the things that we can do to stay healthy with our body?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And, I see a lot of people in fear around me. And so, it's really important that if you allow yourself to be consumed and overrun by fear, that it's going to have a deleterious effect on you in many ways, of course, psychologically, and it's going to have an effect on your body physically, and it's going to make you more susceptible to any type of insult that might come your way. Whether it be an infection, if you think that infections might be a risk, or whether it be a toxic exposure. And and the other aspect of it is when you're consumed by fear, you're unable to reason things out or open yourself up to new ideas. You only considering what you need to do to survive, right? And the people who are voluntarily staying indoors, I think, are in that mind state. And what I think that you really need to come out of that is you need to have a connection to people and a connection to nature. I'm extremely concerned about the social distancing and people being afraid of each other, because we are social animals. We need to congregate. We need to assemble. We need to hug each other. We need to have physical affection and proximity to each other. And if you don't have that, I mean, there's many experiments done on this, actually, that when you have isolation, that you basically crack up. Mm-hmm. So I think that's first and foremost, to try to break out of the intense fear. I mean, I don't expect you to have no fear, because I am afraid myself. I'm not afraid of getting sick, but I am afraid of living in a world where I have no rights and freedoms and where everyone is impoverished. Yeah. But in order to stay physically healthy, getting out and getting sunlight exposure, getting exercise, eating clean food, drinking clean water, right? I know there might be a sort of impulse to, stay in and drink alcohol and, eat processed food or junk food because, you're trying to medicate yourself to feel better, or you're bored and you feel like there's nothing to do. But if you really want to stay healthy, you need to think outside of that and make yourself as optimally healthy as you can right now, because that's what's going to provide the most resistance to any illness that might be coming your way. And, people are always getting ill. We've just on the tail end of the regular flu season. There have already been over 30,000 deaths from the flu in this country, far more than from any other allegedly infectious illness. If you want to take it to the next step, I think that I would recommend that you do some detoxification type of work. Simply increasing your bowel movements would be an excellent start. I would recommend targeting 3 a day. And there's many things you can do to achieve that. I would recommend that you choose a natural method. So there are several herbs that have laxative properties, like senna and cascara. You can also use vegetables. If you boil some beets, if you drink some celery juice, if you just eat a higher fiber diet with more vegetables and perhaps some whole grains like brown rice, that would help you. And also moving your body around, going for walks, getting some exercise is going to help that all come together. It's really important to drink enough water. I recommend to people that you drink 1 quart of water for each 60 pounds of body weight. And in my opinion, the safest water to drink would be either distilled water or reverse osmosis water, because that will take all the toxins out of the water.
Good stuff. One final question for you. Obviously, you're embedded. I mean, you're in the system. You work at a hospital, and the hospitals are basically, for the most part, determining what the rules of engagement are. What will be a bridge too far for you, and how would you respond to that moment in your life? Have you thought about that?
Yes. Well, actually, I don't work in a hospital. I work in a residential facility that has its own medical clinic. And I'm very relieved that I don't work in a hospital, because I can imagine what the security procedures are like there. And then, wearing all this protective gear that actually won't protect you from anything, but it makes everybody look scary and stay away from each other. It's like a physical barrier between people. And I really don't want any part of that. It makes me very uncomfortable, even to see, I went to the grocery store earlier and the cashier was wearing a surgical mask. And, the reality is that if there is a viral particle that you can get, it's much smaller than the pores of the surgical mask.
Right.
So I told her this. I said, imagine if you tried to walk through a door. So she was 5 feet tall. So I said, what if the door was 50 feet high and 50 feet wide? Do you think that would stop you from going through?
Right.
And, I could tell, like, she reacted and she said, no, well, I'm going to still wear the mask anyway.
Right. Because somebody told her to.
Well, because the fear prevents you from being rational, right? She's thinking, well, I don't care. I want to survive. This mask is better than nothing, right? But maybe I planted a seed that she will, start to think about this a little bit. And maybe change her opinion. But I'll tell you where I draw the line is that I will not submit to any testing, even if I fall ill, because of the lack of accuracy. And I worry that I could be separated from my children, that I could be confined against my will, and even subjected to some kind of mandatory treatment. They're trying to use some of these toxic antiviral drugs now. I've seen a protocol that's a sort of a prophylaxis thing, just like giving AZT to someone if they're exposed to, the alleged HIV virus. And that's one of the most toxic drugs available, AZT. And the other viral drugs are similar because they basically act against your DNA. So the other thing is that, I am concerned that there's a vaccine coming down the road, and that it's going to be mandatory at some point. So I'm definitely taking steps to prepare myself for that inevitability. And actually later today, I'll be on an interview with a law expert named Cal Washington, who has a group of collaborators where they've come up with a strategy to protect people against this. And I'll tell you, this strategy is very hopeful to me, because it's not something that is through the court system. If we tried to file a lawsuit or something like that, I don't think it would go anywhere. And most of the courts are shut down. But this is at a much higher level. It will hold the government officials personally responsible and liable for millions of dollars if they force us to vaccinate. So I'm really excited to be partnering with Cal and able to talk about that later tonight.
I think he was on Crow 777 recently. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, that's a good show. People should check that out. Now, where can they find you two doing this, having this talk?
Yes, so we're going to be on Richie from Boston's YouTube channel.
Oh, Richie, yeah.
Yes, and that's going to be at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time tonight. We'll be doing a live stream there. And yes, Crow is also, his show is very good. And I've been on his show a couple of times, and I'm going to be on his show again on the next episode as well.
And you're working on a website, is that correct?
Yes, I have a web developer feverishly trying to get that done. And I'll tell you, I've been working so hard, I haven't had the time to stop and write any material for that or take a headshot even. So I'm sorry for the delay, but it's going to be up and running early next week is my hope.
Good deal. Do you have time to take a couple questions from our chat room?
Yes, of course.
Okay, let's do that. Let's bring Steve back in.
Okay, here I am. Hey, okay, so from Oswald Spengler, he asked, Dr. Kaufman, how long do you think it will be before questioning pandemics is a diagnosable mental disorder?
Well, I think from that video, we've already reached that time. That's what they were saying, that the person didn't have the ability to make his own decisions. And he was, trying to say, peg him as incompetent. So, I think it's very important I like Robert's idea of avoiding hospitals, avoiding the medical system as much as possible. But if you are forced to have an interaction, it's really important to act on a very high moral ground. You have to do your best to maintain equanimity and composure, and just talk to them as if you are, with respect. I respect your position. However, my personal preference is not to submit to this test, and I'd be happy to tell you why if you'd like to sit down and have a discussion. And if you can stay calm and rational and on a higher moral ground, that is your best chance of success.
Great.
Yeah, I see a question here. Ask the doctor, this is from Squirrel. Do you understand synthetic nanobiology and what it does in the body? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I'm not familiar with that term, but I certainly am concerned about various nanoparticles that we may have been exposed to. For one example is the aluminum hydroxide that is added to vaccines is actually quite tiny little particles that make it harder for our body to remove. Also, I'm aware of this very interesting Italian study. There's more drama to this study, but they were using this advanced type of electron microscopy called scanning tunneling microscopy. And they just bought like 20 or 30 different vaccines, different brands, and just started looking at them under the electron microscope. And they discovered all of these nanoparticles of different metals. And I'm talking about metals, all kinds of metals. Like you look at the periodic table and you name it, it was there. And this was really incredible and perplexing because these things are not listed in ingredients. And supposedly, according to the manufacturing process, there would be no obvious source for these nanometals to be in there. And so I think that there certainly is a strong possibility that these could convey some type of toxicity that we really haven't had a chance to investigate. And interestingly, what happened is that this study, which was published in a peer-reviewed journal, you can find the study. I have a copy of it. But after it started to get some notoriety, what happened was the Italian police, I believe, raided their laboratory and confiscated all their computers.
Right. I remember reading about that. It was mind blowing. That was a huge breakthrough in the invalidation of vaccines. I mean, it was almost scandalous at a scandalous level. Yeah. Powerful stuff. Steve, do you have one more for the good doctor before we say good afternoon to him?
Yeah. What's your opinion on critics who say it's better to err on the side of caution?
Well, I mean, I agree that does apply to certain situations, but what the policies that were being implemented, that I call medical martial law, they are beyond reasonable caution by far. And there's also so many contradictions in these policies. Like if this thing really is so contagious, then why is it that you can go to a restaurant and get takeout, and that all the people preparing the food will get these, so-called germs all over the food and then spread it out to scores of people? I mean, that in epidemiology, right, you learn about how do you contain an epidemic. And that would be the main thing that you would be concerned about, anyone who comes in contact with a lot of people. Because if they're sick, then they're spreading it not just to one person, they're spreading it to a lot of people. Right. So, also, obviously, you see President Trump and Dr. Fauci standing right next to each other, shoulder to shoulder. They're not observing any 6-foot rule, and they're perfectly healthy and not worried about getting sick. Also, the meaning of quarantine has been changed. quarantine refers to isolating people who are sick so that healthy people don't get exposed to them. But
Right.
what we are doing is not quarantine. We're isolating healthy people. And the term for that is house arrest.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say imprisonment, right? I mean, that's really what's going on here. Dr. Kaufman, thanks for taking time out to be with us. You're a voice of reason in a turbulent time, and hopefully we can see you somewhere down the line, and keep up the good work. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Robert. And thank you, Steve, too.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right. That's Dr. Andrew Kaufman. And we're going to have him back on again someday. Hopefully, we're going to say goodbye. There you go. See you later. Okay. All right, Steve. An hour of nutrient dense information, enlightenment,
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah. Everyone in the chat room really appreciate that, Dr. Kaufman, too. Said it was fantastic. They were happy to hear some logic and rationale on this subject.
Yeah, voice of reason and informed reason as well. Right. And even Michael, the Logos is about, in my estimation, cosmic reason. I mean, this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the cosmic pulse of truth. And I'm looking forward to getting this book, and I'm going to score that book. What'd you think of that video with that guy?
Yeah, some people were saying it was possibly staged, but that didn't seem staged to me.
That level of emotion at the end, you cannot stage that. I'm sorry.
No, that was, he thought it was real. That's for sure.
You can't stage that. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's probably an example of what's going to happen more often if we're not careful.
And, I show that stuff not to freak people out, right? But you got to know what's going on.
Yeah.
You have to be aware of this. You have to be able to overcome these hurdles in your own head, because, these are the ghosts and these are the phantoms, that we have to deal with. These are the demons we have to deal with.
Well, we have to stay out of those situations as much as we can and do all we can now to prevent those kind of situations.
Right.
Which is what we're trying to do, get the word out more and more. And I encourage everybody to share as much as they can, this kind of information. Because people are looking for it.
So I had a situation yesterday where I'd finished the show, and I live right across from a grade school, and they have netted off all the playground equipment. Like, you can't use this stuff now. So I heard some noise coming from there, and I saw this truck, and so I decided to go over there, see what was happening. And I actually have it on my phone. I didn't download it, but maybe I could actually play this thing. It probably won't be the greatest video, but let me see if I could do this. Hold on. Give me a second here. If I can't, oh, here we go. Hold on. Stop, damn it. Hold on. Get this thing to go backwards. All right, I'm just going to start here. So this is me at the local school. Hold on. Now it's not working. Oh, here we go. All right, I'm gonna show it on Monday, because I got to get off the phone. But essentially, what happened is that I went over there, and there was a group of guys, and they were Mexican, probably quote unquote illegal. Most of them didn't speak a lick of English. There was only one guy that spoke any English at all. And again, I'm not making a value judgment. I'm just giving you my assessment of the situation. Okay. And they were installing something, and I was trying to get them to tell me what they were installing, and they would not tell me. And it was this, and I'm going to go back over there. It's this really weird bar that is kind of at the end of the this playground area. I'm like, why would they put this thing there? And why would they choose to put it there now? And I'm getting the sense that it might be connected to 5G. Like they may have set up a 5G either conduit or repeater outside of the school. Why would they do this? It's very strange, very unusual. So when I asked them questions, they weren't really very forthcoming. But then they said that they worked for this company called E.F. Harper. And I went online and I could not find E.F. Harper. Like the only E.F. Harper I could find was in Renton, Washington, but there was no local kind of office or facility for E.F. Harper. It was very strange. But bringing this back to Dr. Kaufman, none of those guys were wearing masks. None of those guys were practicing social distancing. You know?
Yeah, they're selling it as if it's Ebola, but yeah, it's just inconsistent with the procedures you're supposed to be following.
Right.
Yeah, I drive I-4 here in Orlando. They've been rebuilding that, and I've been watching them put all the wires in and cameras and everything else. And yeah, they're still actively and like you said, there's a lot of different companies that are involved. I guess it's privatized or whatever, putting in all the infrastructure there. And James True the other night did a little live stream, and he was talking about how the 5G networks, they're going to be connected, but they're also as part of the Space Force. Remember that movie Oblivion with Tom Cruise?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, with the round thing. Yeah, that the network supposedly is going to be within a football field line of sight, each one, but it's going to be patrolled by these Space Force military drones. And and we're the virus. You've seen that picture? Humans are not a virus.
Right.
He's saying we're considered, and I think in the legal system, I remember hearing someone said we're considered monsters in the first place. We're the enemy, and because we all have corona now, and they don't want viruses, crossing the lines. That's where the mandatory vaccination may come in too. Limit our movement. It's yeah.
Have you seen the videos of people setting the 5G towers on fire? Have you seen that stuff?
I have. Yeah, and then he cut the line and it fell over. Right.
So apparently they're going hog wild in the UK, and there's a growing incidents of people setting these 5G towers on fire, and apparently the conduit inside of these towers is highly flammable. It's like a freaking fuse.
Really?
I mean, you light these things and they just torch like month-old Christmas tree. I mean, that's why they burn so easily, even with all the metal casing on them. It has to do with what's inside of the actual towers themselves. And by the way, the 5G repeaters are called MIMOs, and they actually have to be almost within a football field apart. That because the 5G signal is a very short burst. It's a high density short burst signal. So in order for the entire network to be established, these things have to be everywhere. And I mean everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. The millimeter wave. And it's just like the lines in the sky. You would think people would question it more, but they just go along with it.
Well, when you have people like Cliff High saying that 5G is being built to defeat the aliens, that goes a long ways to convincing people on the fringe that 5G is good, right? Yeah. And then there's the good 5G, then there's the bad 5G. The Chinese had the bad 5G, and we're gonna have the good 5G. Really, like what the fuck is the difference? I'm sorry, and I'm not that. I don't mean to insult people because I know some of these people are listening to the show, and it's not a broadside against them, but it just feels like we've either got to be all in or all out on this. And, in my estimation, 4G is just okay. Fine. It's fine. 3G, fine. I mean, it's just, it's overkill. And then beyond G, 5G, there's 6G, 7G. I mean, when does the G end?
Yeah. The 4G is good enough for humans and the 5G is for the machines.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, go
ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've helped them, build the electronic prison around us. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I haven't gone into Chatlandia. Anything else going on in Chatlandia?
I haven't looked here recently. This isn't as easy as you might think.
I don't know. I mean, I've got a lot of practice at it. It did take a while to kind of be able to sync both sides of my brain. You'll get there. I have faith in you, Steve.
Yeah, Snake Jones says, Ben even witnessed one up close. These damn things have LED cloaking abilities. I've got a question.
Yeah.
We always, with the secret societies, there's been a lot of talk about the Knights Templars, but there's also the Hospitallers that we never hear about. And I believe it's the Knights of Malta, right? But
yeah,
I
think
wonder
you're right.
Yeah, and that's supposedly where the hospitals system came from. But I wonder, what role they're playing in all of this.
I don't. I haven't really spent a lot of time with it, but I have thought about obviously what's going on with the hospitals. And I was talking with Ursilia, and one of the things that Ursilia shared with me was that all this telemedicine stuff was ready and ramped up to go prior to coronavirus. So what we're seeing now is we're seeing big tech come in and be able to kind of take over hospitalization and, moving doctors further away from actually, theoretically working on people. And maybe that's a good thing. I don't know, based on what we're seeing. But that I think that's an interesting development. And then another interesting development was, Emily and I, we just mashed it up the other day. If you guys haven't seen the Matrix Mash with me and Emily, go check it out over on Off Planet. And, we talked about Eric Garcetti, the mayor of LA, and, becoming one of these little Hitler mayoral types. And now there's this huge backlash in LA where because I looked at the statistics and they're looking at about a 30% default on mortgages. And that's probably like pretty, that's a pretty, I think, modest average, right? I think it could go higher. It could get up to, 40%. That's almost half the population defaulting on mortgages. And we're not just talking about houses. We're talking about people that own properties. We're talking about people that own commercial properties as well. Keep that in mind. Commercial properties, apartment buildings, multiple properties, right? These people, if they're not getting rent, they're going to default on their mortgages. Yeah. Can you say another bailout? Can you say another bailout? Oh, absolutely. It'd be another bail. But guess what's going to happen at that point? Instead of China owning the paper, because we've got the money from China last time to do the bailout. And China owns paper on a lot of properties. People don't know that. Like China is one of the biggest real estate owners in California as a result of the first bailout. Okay. So instead of China owning the paper, the government will own the paper here. This is what's going to happen. And so what does that mean? It means that all of a sudden we could have a radical paradigm shift where hospitals who are hitting the rocks and running out of cash could be nationalized. They're talking about, again, I watched last night on Tucker Carlson. They're talking about this, the infrastructure deal and associating and attaching it with jobs. That's in the discussion. Earlier in the week, we explored the WPA, the New Deal with Roosevelt. We already have the government having its hooks inside of big business now with the bailouts. So we'll have big business, and if medical with the hospitals, we'll also have big pharma. Now we're going to have housing, right? That's going to be a part of the deal. And then the final collapse will probably be the internet. So what we'll wind up seeing is the nationalization of just about every asset that we have. And I think that's the plan. And once the government moves in to a massively defaulted housing market, guess what they're going to do? They're going to basically say, okay, well, you need to move here and you need to move here. And, this is Agenda 21. This is the Agenda 21 2030 program in action. In order to create that, what do you have to do? You have to crash the original model or the previous model. You have to break it so you can rebuild it. And this is what's going to happen with the housing crisis, especially if people stop paying rent. And it's like, am I telling people to not pay rent? Actually, I'm not. I'm saying if you can pay rent, pay your damn rent, because that way we're going to stave this thing off. If you can. If you can't pay your rent, then that's a whole other topic of conversation. Your mortgage, try to pay your mortgage if you can. Right. If you can't, you could probably get it out a few months, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Who knows where the default zone is and you're going to be on your mortgage. But I can see this happening. And these are all choke points, right? They're choking off cash, liquidity, assets. So those choke points collapse. And then, or those entities collapse due to the choke points. And then they're going to build it back up again. Hello, Agenda 21, green economy. Hello, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, new housing rules and regulations, even new education. Like my kid goes to high school and they've had this telelearning thing ramped up and ready to go. I mean, it is a program like you can't put the brakes on traditional education, right? You can't. And then have this other thing not ready to roll out.
Right. Just like the Homeland Security bill.
Exactly. I was just thinking that's what it is. All these things that they've got put in place are the equivalent of Homeland Security. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Patriot. It's a Patriot Act. We're watching various versions of the Patriot Act being put in place.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a long plan coming.
Yeah.
And I think you're very close with your assessment. And I was listening to you and Emily that show last night with a friend of mine, and but he pointed out that Trump, pulling out of the global climate change deal and stuff is, that's a little inconsistent with him outflanking the Dems on the green economy.
Trump
that doesn't mean anything. It does.
Trump will he doesn't care, right? I mean, as long as he's running it,
mm-hmm.
He can define it any way he wants.
Right.
Right. We got Hope Easton here.
There we go.
Let's bring her on. Hi, Hope.
Can you hear me? I don't think you can see me.
I'm working on that. Let's see. Well, you should be able to have video. You should, because it says stop video. Hold on. Let's do this. There we go.
Oh,
there she is.
Hi, guys. China owns a lot of Vancouver and New York as well as California.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Steve, say hi to Hope.
Hi, Hope. Again.
We've met.
So, Hope, you're a little hot on the vocals, just to FYI.
All right, guys. Talk to you later.
Hi, Steve. We'll see you in a bit.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, I think it's better. Absolutely. So, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's like the gig I've had in a month. I'll put gig in parentheses.
So, one of the things that I've been trying to do here is bring on some more musical guests and entertainment, and we have intellectual food. We have kind of spiritual food. We have our dark conspiratorial food, and we have to have our musical food. Right. So, I started to see Hope show up in some of the comments on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, this is a very active person. Let's check her out. And then I said, oh my God, this person plays the cello. She's got some skills. So I asked Hope if she wanted to come on the show and play some of her cello. And, luckily for us, she said yes. So thanks for doing that.
My pleasure to be here.
So, of course, it's the proverbial Hope. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, classically trained. I ended up quitting cello for a while after I did a Fulbright scholarship. And just was a little bit, I think, burned out on classical music. And actually sold this amazing instrument and bought it back, which you can't really do that. And when I bought it back, I ended up going on tour with a singer-songwriter, English girl, and had played with her for maybe a year before we toured. And I was like, how do you write a song? And the guitar player is like, I don't know, just try. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try. And I actually started writing without any instruments, just lyrics and melodies. Had my brother, who's a great guitar player, lay down tracks for that. I have to find what I did with that music. It's somewhere. And then slowly did the cello because I did guitar. I played guitar first for writing songs. It's a lot easier than the cello because I had a little bit of like the horse blockers, to play and sing on the cello. So that's kind of a nutshell. And when I did that, I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
How old were you when you took the cello up?
7.
7 years old.
We all played instruments. My mom was a pianist, really an artist, but she played piano really well. And I'm the 4. So let's see, flute, violin, guitar, and she played piano kind of were all taken. And I think my mom wanted a trio. She wanted to have violin, cello, piano trio. Like, do you want to play cello? And I didn't really care. I mean, I'm the smallest, but I have the biggest instrument. I just wanted to do something because everybody else had an instrument. So I was like, I just picked it right up.
So you came from a musical family, obviously, right? Yes.
Yeah. Well, yes, on my mom's side.
Yeah, on your mom's side.
Okay. My dad had a violin in his hand once, but he was a doctor, so he wasn't too gifted in music.
Well, that's okay. He I'm sure had other gifts. So what's your life like now that you're not touring and doing all the things that a musician theoretically does?
It's at a standstill. I mean, first of all, we perform for huge groups of people, usually if whatever it is, a religious gig, a wedding, an event, a corporate event, that's always many, many people. So basically just everything got canceled. Or I like to say postponed because a lot of my gigs that I had lined up, they're like, we're going to postpone this, which I kind of liked better than canceling. And I think a lot of musicians are having a hard time because they don't feel like playing. They're like, what am I playing for? I don't have a job. I don't have a concert. And I know they're doing some of the a lot of people are doing internet concerts, which is, it's okay, but it's not like performing for a live person. I mean, at least with you, maybe there's a lot of people watching this, but I'm performing for you because I can see.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm fully into this. So you're going to get just complete, unadulterated, uncut focus and attention and even adoration. I'm going to give it all back.
I like
so
that.
What do you got for us today?
So I wrote this song on February. I like to date my songs. So that's for some reason I've been doing that for a long time. I just put the date. Maybe because I know a lot of astrology, I'm not sure. But anyway, I wrote this on February 6th. And I was just helping my girlfriend get a new car because she had got in a bad accident with her other car. So she was totaled and she had to get a new car. And we're driving, down to Anaheim area. And it's just like, there's so many cars and she wanted a bigger car, which I found kind of strange because she's a violinist and she plays a small instrument. So if I didn't cello, I would have a smaller car. And I have a Prius. I don't have a big car, but it's big inside. So I was kind of like, why do people have such big cars? I guess they feel protected or something. I don't know.
Right.
So that's where the start and the virus thing was starting, I knew people that were in China. Like I have some friends that are Chinese or Taiwanese. I was like, that was the New Year, was the end of January. And I was like, are you out of China? I texted my one friend and he's like, yeah, I got out. So I was like, I just thought, somehow that was just in the back of my consciousness. That's where the song kind of dark, but I try to bring a little light because my name is.
So new car, big car meets Exodus from China vis-a-vis the coronavirus. These are the muses for the piece we're about to hear, right?
Yeah, well, that was kind of in my consciousness. And then it kind of comes out,
Right. Oh, she froze on us.
Words when I write, I guess.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see what you got. Let's hear it.
I think this is called. I have a hard time naming my songs, but I think this is "The Light of the Sun" is what I'm gonna name it.
Okay.
Bigger cars, bigger mouths, what will we feed? Obesity, new disease we will breed. Dark of the night, infiltration I see. The dark of the night, breathe it in. The dark of the night, breathe it in. The dark of the night, breathe it in. Smaller cars, fast in flight, future I see. Half metal, half human, some deity. Brilliance of consciousness we will now bring. The light of the sun, breathe it in. The light of the sun, breathe it in. The light of the sun, breathe it in. Change, feel our way out of the mold into dynamics, the seed of our soul. Light of our consciousness we will now own. Breathe the light of the sun, breathing the light of the sun. I'll breathe the light of the sun.
Right.
Thank you.
Bravo, bravo. I just noticed something about you.
Okay.
You have really long fingers.
I do have long. You should see my mom has huge hands and fingers, but I do have long. They're skinny, but they're long.
Right. So that's got to be able to help you get up and down that that neck on the cello, huh?
It's definitely. I have a small cello too. This cello is a little on the small side. I mean, it's really, if anyone can see, it's really fantastic. It's like 1776.
Wow.
It's Italian, and it's just a very special instrument. I mean, it writes half the songs. That's how I feel.
Well, I'm glad you got it back from wherever you were able to get it from.
Yeah, that was my Jay Leno story. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to do that, to sell something like this and get it back.
Right. Did you ever see the movie The Red Violin?
I did.
Yeah. What did you think of that? Did you like it?
If I can remember, I knew the violinist Josh Bell. I played with him when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually performing in that movie. But yeah, I don't know what they were doing when they were making these instruments, but who knows what's in the varnish. And also the wood is usually, the Italian wood, I think, was in water, they say.
Oh,
so
interesting.
It's very special that they were using
Mm-hmm.
the Italian. Anyway, yeah.
You kind of remind me a little of Jeff Beck when you were playing. You ever watch Jeff Beck play guitar?
I have not seen him play guitar.
You should watch a couple Jeff Beck videos, especially recently. You've got some very similar kind of finger moves on the neck. Good stuff. So what do you got next? What's up next?
I'll do some electric cello, which people like something that's new. I guess that's what it is. Because the electric instruments, I have a Yamaha. They were actually made for silent practice.
Oh, well, with headphones, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think so because, it's so condensed, so many people in Japan, and to practice, I don't know how they live there because it's very, it's not good for someone who has claustrophobia. Let's put it that way, because they have very small places. So that's how
they have a lot of social rules and etiquette that allow them to live in very dense areas.
Right.
They've figured those things out.
Okay, so I'm just going to move this microphone 1 second. But normally, when I record, it's funny because my producer's like, why would we use that instrument? We're going to use your real cello. So I don't ever really record. I've recorded something with the electric, but most of my songs I record with the real instrument. Sorry, this is...
Yeah, take your time. All good.
Robert.
You're not on union scale right now.
Well, I never am, really. Can you hear that?
Yep.
All right. So this is a whole nother animal to stand and play as well.
I can see.
And then to sing at the same time. It's like 5 different things going on. I'm going to see if this effect is working because I have a little... Let's see. It's a little much. I'm not sure if I'm going to...
Okay. I kind of liked it, but you're the artist.
For some of the song.
Okay.
So this is a song called I actually just finished a song, and I wanted to do a video, but that will be delayed. So I'm gonna put it I think I'm gonna put it up with just a photo on YouTube. So it's called Intermittent Conversation.
And what date was this written on?
I think this is February. I have to look at my book, but this was last year. I did this one. It was like 8 years ago. It takes a while to actually produce a song. You think I understand why, albums take a long time for people to do. It's not like the quickest process. But
right.
The song has everything. It has, the harmonies and other instruments and of course a drum track, and it's really cool. So I'm going to put it out today probably. And then I guess maybe I'll do a video later.
Okay. Are you getting serious now? You're taking the hoodie off.
I'm getting warm because I'm working hard. See, that's so loud. Oh. A little loud. I'll use that for the end.
Everything happens for a reason. But I say, what reason does it happen to you? Can you make it happen, make your dreams come true? Do you have the tools? Have you released the fools who broke all the rules? Intermittent conversation. It takes 9 months for gestation. So what you gonna do? The time will pull you through. It's like clockwork working. Guess you got to learn to flow with the planetary mode to see the magic working. Oh, 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 oh. What's the reason in anything happening? Even chaos theory has a pattern. Can you make it happen? Make your dreams come true. True that your proof would be like bread and butter. Intermittent conversation. It takes 9 months for gestation. So what's it gonna be? The time will tell and see. It's like clockwork working. Guess you got to learn to flow with the planetary mode to see the magic working. Oh, 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 oh. Intermittent conversation. It takes 9 months for gestation. So what's it gonna be? The time will tell and see. It's like clockwork working. Guess you got to learn to flow with the planetary mode to see the magic working. Oh, 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 oh.
Wow, love it. All right.
The wah-wah pedal. It's a little loud. It's
That
hard
was great.
to custom. Thank you.
That was really, really great. So are you going to release that today on YouTube, or how are you going to release that?
Yeah, I'll release it on YouTube, on my YouTube channel.
Okay. Well, let's give out some coordinates. HopeEaston.com is the website, right?
Yep. And same as my YouTube is Hope Easton as well. I have a lot of videos, lots of music. So if you want to subscribe,
Right.
I have a lot of classical, a little bit of everything on there.
And do you actually have music for sale by any chance? CDs, downloads, stuff like that?
You know, I have everything on iTunes, Amazon, CD Baby. And if you want to connect to me directly, I can always send. I have like 4 CDs. And I'm working on other CDs. So all the songs I have, like as singles that are up on YouTube, a lot of them are going to be the next CD.
Okay. So there's a way to support Hope in her time of
No
quarantine.
job.
Quarantine. Yeah. Do you have any plans to do a lot of writing during this time, this downtime?
I'll do what I can. I mean, I actually recorded the first song on the cello, but I really like to work with my producer to do vocals at his house because it just is so much easier to have somebody engineering and listening and, cutting and, stopping you. When you do, for me to do it myself, I find it very difficult, and I'm not really the best judge of something being perfect. And then, harmonies and stuff. But so I think if I can get as much as I have on the cello, because I can usually record my instrument pretty well and quickly by myself. So hopefully in, May, when we can actually see people sooner than later.
We hope.
Yeah, right.
We hope. Let me bring Steve back on, and let's see if you've got any questions from Chatlandia.
Chatlandia.
Hey, Steve. Hold on a second.
Good.
There you go. There you're on. Yep.
Back. Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure about questions, but a lot of great comments. Everybody really loved it. Thought it was very cool. Miyaki Alchemy says, total artist. Awesome. Thank you. June. Where's that?
Nice to hear.
Judy Anderson said, the songs were so intricate and her skill and gift for composing is obvious. and cool pants. Everybody loves your pants.
Well, I wanted to do something wacky, so you know.
You just ooze art. Right.
Well, when I look at those pants, I think of the band Living Color. That's what I think of.
I saw them. I saw them one time.
Well,
Color,
I mean,
cult of personality.
You know, really dress up, but I thought I'll just wear something Aquarius and funky because I have Aquarius all in my first house.
Yeah, no, it's good. Anything else, Steve?
I don't think so.
No auto tune.
You know, if we can get my live event back on track this year, it'd be great to have you come out and do that, Hope. That'd be tremendous.
No problem. As long as I don't have to fly and get vaccinated, I'll drive.
Right.
I'm not getting
We'll send our posse out there to rescue you. Right. Where's all your cats, by the way? Where did they run to?
One's right here meowing. Come here, Milky Way. Milky Way Galaxy, the love machine. That's his full name, but
Hope has more cats than I do.
I know.
How many cats do you have, Steve?
I have two.
Two. So our two cats together equal Hope's posse.
There you go.
Hold on, he's coming. He wants to make an appearance. You're so slow.
Beverly Wise says, "Love it. Thank you for a big dose of hope."
There. It's a Milky Way. Do you see?
I love that guy. Hey, buddy. What's happening? Reminds me of Jasper a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. He doesn't have green eyes, but
yeah. Well, shoot, Hope. We'd love to have you stay on, and I'd love to have this show keep going for another couple hours. But
well, have me. I could play some classical music one day if you like some nice Bach.
Yeah, I tell you what. When things get really depressing, we'll have you back on for some Bach. How's that sound?
Well, Bach is more depressing, but okay.
No, I want to go really deep into it, Hope. This is dive right into the depression.
Well,
break on through to the other side. So,
right?
Yeah.
We're gonna make it. There's hope. Come on, people.
Yeah. There is hope, and she's here. She's
Yeah.
visible, visceral, palpable, and you can find her at hopeeaston.com. So thanks again for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. You guys are awesome. Thank you for the work that you do.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, take good care. Bye, Hope.
Ciao.
It's pretty cool, huh, Steve?
That was great. That was great, and I love the song lyrics too. So those are her songs.
Oh yeah. Came out of her mind, the mind of Hope Easton. Yeah. So she's still alive. Oh, okay. Hope, I'm gonna mute you now. There you go. Not that I don't want to hear your laughter. I'm gonna mute you. Anyway, so good show today. Thanks, Steve, for all your help.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. And we got a great show lined up for next Friday. You want to tell people who we've got coming on?
I can't even think. Who is it? Richard Grossinger.
Yep.
And who was the other one?
Howard Storm.
Howard Storm. That's right. That's going to be. I'm looking forward to that one too. That's near-death experience, right?
Yeah, he's the guy that was the professor, and he was with a group of students in Paris. Has the near-death experience, and then he has a conversion experience, right? I mean, this is a very real. But the other thing that happened to him during that time is that he wound up also having a prophecy of America, and that doesn't come out in the video. And I'm going to talk to him about that if he's willing to talk about it. And we'll also talk about his other experience. And I'm going to play part of his video on Sunday night on the Sunday night show because there's some very interesting astrological connections with it as well. And then you just got in touch with Sayer G, and he's agreed to be on the show too, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm not sure which Friday, but yeah, he's very agreeable. He said he loves you and he'll be here sometime.
Yeah, I love Sayer G, man. He's a really good dude, and I started to do readings for him a couple of years ago, and we've done some work off and on. I've been trying to get him on the show, and I think once you came on board, you legitimized me, Steve. So, you gave me the bona fides, and so he'll be with us soon, hopefully, and we'll talk more about this Corona madness.
Right.
And I think that's kind of all. And I know we're going to get Jimmy Brent on here soon as well.
Right.
But and Richard Grossinger, my buddy, next week. And what's interesting is both Richard and Howard are both Scorpios, so there'll be a definite Scorpio theme for next Friday for all you astrological and Scorpio fans out there.
Yeah, and I have a thought to end with too. And I think it's an Oriental saying that just when the caterpillar thought the world was over, he became a butterfly. And I know that if you take the butterfly, if you help the butterfly out of the chrysalis, it can't fly. So, we've all been busy caterpillars doing our work. The caterpillar has to eat, to get all the energy. We've been working, and right now what we're going through is a little bit of a struggle, but the butterfly needs that struggle to break out of the chrysalis to have enough life force to fill its wings so that it can fly. Without that struggle, it doesn't make it. So that's where we are right now.
And there are another of other species, number of other species who have different but kind of similar struggles. One of the metaphors that might be pertinent are the baby turtles that are born in the beaches down in Florida, and they've got to make a mad dash to the sea, before that they get swooped up and eaten up by. I guess that means not everybody's going to make it. No, I'm just kidding. And then that's a little bit of dark humor, Steve. And then we have the little kangaroos. The kangaroos are born and they have to actually climb up to that pouch. That's like they got to get there somehow. So birth is a struggle, and I think that's what you're talking about. And I totally agree with that.
Yeah, the baby kangaroos have a womb with a view.
Oh, I love that. That's great stuff. Really great stuff. And I think I think Michael spoke to that too. It's like the magic or the hope or the grace of catastrophe. And we often look at things in our life as being terrible or bad, and we want to label them, when in actuality, they can be some of the greatest gifts and teachers that we run across. And I know it's tough sometimes when you're in it, but if you can remember that and stay present, you can make it through some of this stuff.
Yeah, I feel very alive right now. It's the energy that's coming. It's a little disruptive, but it's also energy that you can use, and I think we all are doing that. And I'm very proud. And I've seen in the chat rooms how the people say they're proud of our community and just the community in general, how positive and how we're stepping up and doing what we're supposed to be doing. So I really believe we're going to get through this. It's hard to determine how well. We know that what we're up against is powerful, but it's hard to know how much of a house of cards it is. But the energy in your heart is stronger. Our inner energy is stronger than the worldly energy, and that's what we're engaging now. And so I'm very positive about that.
Yeah, I'm definitely on board with that. So, well, thanks everybody for being a part of another edition of the Friday FArcast. And thank you, Steve, for helping us get the guests and line everything up. And thanks to Dr. Jones and Dr. Kaufman and Dr. Hope. Here we go. All three providing inspiration and medicine for the soul. I'll be back on Sunday night with Sunday Night Astro Live, and we're going to look at the Howard Storm video, going to get into his chart and a lot of other stuff too. And then, of course, we'll be back on Monday with 15 Minutes of Flame. So use your head to discern what's real, your heart to set what's possible. So for me and Steve over at the Friday FArcast, have yourself a really good weekend, and bye for now.